So you go to a store and swipe your prepaid card. What happens really? We'll go through what info flows through the ecosystem and what happens in a processor that approves or declines that transaction. Say I go to Trader Joe's and swipe my card for $35. Trader Joe's has partnered with a bank, also called the acquirer, and from there the information will flow through a card network such as Visa or MasterCard, and the network then forwards that to the cardholder bank or the issuer. And this is the one which decides whether to approve or decline that transaction, and then the response will travel back to the point of sale. All of this happens on a protocol called ISO 8583, which is a way for different financial systems to interact with each other. For example, if a card that used is a Cash App card, then the last leg here would have three parties involved: the fintech, which is Cash App, the processor, such as Marqeta, and Sutton, which is the sponsor bank. For our conversation today, we'll be discussing about what happens in the processor, which is the one which deals with the ISO 8583 messages. This is how an ISO 8583 message looks like. As you can see, it's pretty easy to read. Um, let's see what it's made of. There are three main categories here. The first four characters, that's the message type indicator. That decides the main parties involved and the type of message itself. The next is a bitmap, and that describes what fields and field lengths make up the data elements itself. And the data elements fields that contains all the details of the payment transaction. Briefly about the message type indicator, the first field is a version number. The second is the purpose of the message, and we'll go into how this is used when we talk about the life cycle in a bit. And the different types of this are authorization, financial message, or a reversal. And the third one, this says whether it's a request or a response. And the fourth one is if the message originated from an acquirer or from an issuer. So in this case, if it is a 0100, which is a 100 message, you know that it's an authorization request from an acquirer. The data elements itself, they can be split into a few components. The card or cardholder information, such as the PAN number. So in this case, the 4477, that's a Visa card number. The next set is a merchant information, and that was one of the important ones are merchant category code. So with this, you know whether the card swipe was at a grocery store or is it a casino. The third set is the transaction details. So in this case, the 840, that's a US country code. So you know that the transaction was made domestic and it was for $35. And the 4040, this one is the encrypted PIN block that is used when you make that transaction. Overall, there are 8 message classes, 7 message functions, and over 100 fields that make up the ISO 853 protocol. And the processor must be capable of interpreting and responding to all of these. Now, let's talk about the life cycle a bit more. When a card is swiped and an auth request, that is a 100 message, goes to the processor responds with a 110 message. And auth is part of a dual message system. That is, the auth is just a hold. It removes the $35 from the available balance of the cardholder, but it's not yet a completed transaction. So if you go to a restaurant, the $35 is the initial hold. The finalized amount includes a tip amount, and that will come in later in a clearing file. So if the clearing file doesn't contain this transaction, then the hold expires and the money will go back into the available balance for that card. So that's how the auth is part of a dual message system. Now that is different from a ATM, and if you go and withdraw cash there, that is a financial message and is a single message system. So a 200 message request goes to the processor, and the processor would respond with a 210 message. And in this case, the dollar is debited from the card and immediately finalized. It does not wait for a clearing message later. Okay, so that was the happy path scenario. Now let's look at a case where the 100 message goes to the network, but the processor itself is not reachable. What happens then? In this case, a feature called stand in comes into play. The network can stand in on behalf of the processor based on pre-agreed rules between the issuer and the network. And if the issuer decides that the risk it is willing to take, say for example, is $50 per card, even if the system is ever down, then in this case, Visa would approve the $35 transaction and the cardholder is not even aware that there's a problem here. Once the system is back online, Visa would send an advice message to the issuer, and the issuer has to accept that transaction mandatorily. So, if for whatever reason the cardholder does not have enough balance, the account will go negative, and the issuer may have to eat that loss. That's the price that you'll have to pay for the system itself being down. And this is where a auth advice or a 120 message comes into play. Let's look at another error scenario. A 100 auth message goes through. The issuer provides a one-time Visa is unable to reach the merchant bank. The transaction is declined, but we also need to roll back that original transaction for this cardholder. In this case, Visa would send a 420 reversal advice message so that the original transaction is rolled back, and a 430 reversal advice response is got back to Visa. So that's a glimpse into the life cycle